So what did we say we were going to discuss? This is the interesting part to me. Remember, we got a rectangle and an image. Let me get this image so that it is hidden again. Currently, we're attaching flip 3. Let's attach flip 1 and go look at flip 1. Flip 1, if I run this code, does nothing more than instantly show the image. Oh, hey, got lucky there. So it immediately shows the image, and then when it's told to flip again a moment later, it immediately hides it. It's not a very good effect. It's not very visually pleasing or aesthetically pleasing.
It's your speed round kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's extremely straightforward, however.
Hmm.
So what do we do in here? We mark the image as basically visible or not visible depending on its current state. So if the card is currently visible, it becomes not visible. If it is visible, it becomes not visible. We're just toggling the visible flag for the card image. Then we mark the face up, and we say that flipping is false because we're done. We finished the flipping event. And then we can ignore the rest of this. So not very pleasing. What we'd rather do is have some kind of nice visual effect. So here we have flip 2. Now flip 2 uses a transition, and what it's going to do is it's going to scale the image. First it's going to zoom it out, make it small, and then it's going to zoom it back in, and when it zooms back in, it will seem as if the image has been made to appear. So let me go turn it on so you can see what it does, and then I'll step through it. And then I'll show you the one that I prefer, that most people think of when they think of flipping. Was that too quick? Could you even see that?
Yeah,
I'm seeing
it.
it on mine.
I can see
So
it.
I have to warn people watching this. I'll slow it down in a moment, but it's as far as visual aesthetics, it's very hard to see anything nice looking on a video playback because we're only catching certain frames when this gets transmitted over Google Play. But let me slow it down as part of the discussion of how it works. And then we'll go on to flip 3. And I'm already running us over. So okay. I'm going to run this code. I'm going to look at it backwards so you can understand it forwards. The first line of code that's going to execute here is actually this bit right here. I'm going to define a couple of functions up above, but they don't get executed yet. The first thing that will execute is the last line of flip 2, and it's a transition where I'm operating on the card, and what I'm doing is I'm changing the X scale and the Y scale to a very small but not 0 value. You could change this to 0, but Corona will complain. It does not like a 0 scaling value. You get a warning. So it's my suggestion that you simply choose a very small value, like 0.05 or 0.01, something so that it's not completely set to 0. And then we tell it, take 250 milliseconds to do this scaling, and I'm going to make this longer because it was too hard to see, so I'm going to make it 1,250 or 1.25 seconds. And then I'm going to tell it, when you get done, you remember that function that I defined above? Go ahead and call that. And lastly, this isn't really important, I chose a custom easing of in-circ, which basically is it'll quickly start to scale down and then slow down at the end, or I can't remember if it's slow at the beginning. The point is that I've used reciprocal easings here, as you'll see in a moment, so that it gives it a smooth effect where there's a fast, slow, fast scaling, which may not be at all visible when I run this. Okay, so when it gets done, it's going to run on complete 1. So let's look at on complete 1. We defined the function above, and why did I do that? I did it so that it would be visible at the point that I used it in this function call. That's really important. So I used a little trick here, first of all, where I made 2 local variables, on complete 1, on complete 2, and then I defined a function and assigned it to these variables. And the reason I did that is because when you read through onComplete1, you'll see that what it does is it changes the visibility of the image. Now that at this point, when this is executing, the card is very, very small. You can hardly see it. And what I want to do is I want to make the image visible, but because it's very small, you won't see it yet, and it's happening fairly quickly. And then I want to transition the whole group, which is the card containing the background image, the rectangle, and the image itself, back up to 1 or 100% scale. And I'll make this slow too. So I'm going to take 1.25 seconds to do so. And then I'm going to use the onComplete business again. So when it's completed, when it's finished, I want it to execute onComplete2. So I could simply have defined onComplete2 above here, and then it would have been visible to this function definition. It's all about visibility and scope. But I like to number things in order, so I simply forward declared the two function variables, the variables that will contain the references to the functions, and then filled in those values later. But at the time this function gets called, onComplete2 will now contain a value. So let's think linearly in terms of time. We enter flip2, we define two variables, that is, we declare two variables. We fill in complete1, we assign a function to it, then we assign a function to onComplete2, and then we run this. Within here, we refer to this variable, which has already been filled, so by the time it needs to execute this, there'll be something in it. As we call this, there's something in it, so we're still in good shape. However, when we defined this function, we referred to onComplete2. At this point, as Lua was constructing this code, there's nothing assigned to it. It's an empty handle. Lua realizes this and says, okay, I'll put aside some space to store whatever's going to be put there. But by the time this executes, we've already in time passed this point. So we defined it. It's got an empty handle for it right here. Then we put something in there. And Lua says, aha, that's what you meant to go in there. So by the time this function is called, there's something here which gets passed to the onComplete function call, and it does the right thing. So the point is when you have these tricky chicken or egg scenarios, the way you can resolve it is through forward declaration, which I use all the time in my applications. I forward declare almost all my functions, even if I don't need to, because I want to avoid the case where later on I say, I should have put that function definition before this one because I'm calling function B from function A, or I just avoid the whole bit of confusion. I forward declare everything, then I assign values to the forward declarations as I create them, and then I run my code, and that solves 99% of the timing sequence problems.